I, 28F, am at my wit's end. My sister, K, 25F, and I have always been close, but lately, it feels like we're on opposite sides of a war. The war is against our dads, 55M, gambling addiction, and K is, in my opinion, actively helping him lose. It started subtly. Dad would borrow money from us for emergencies. K, bless her heart, always gave it to him, convinced he'd pay it back. I was more skeptical, especially after he missed a few paydays. Then, about 6 months ago, it escalated. He lost his job and started draining his savings. K, who has a decent job as a graphic designer, started giving him larger sums, telling me, he's our dad, we have to help him. Last week, I found out Dad had taken out a payday loan using K's name as a reference. When I confronted K, she got defensive. He was desperate, he said he'd pay it back before it even hit my credit score, she exclaimed, tears welling up. You don't understand, he's my dad, I can't just let him drown. I snapped. Drown? K, he's already underwater. And you're throwing him more life rafts made of quicksand. He's not going to pay it back. He's going to keep gambling until there's nothing left. You're not helping him, you're enabling him. The argument got heated. She accused me of being heartless and not caring about our family. I told her she was naive and that her help was actually destroying him and herself. She hasn't spoken to me since. Now, Dad is asking me for money, claiming he needs it for rent. I know it's a lie. I also know Kay is probably giving him whatever she can. I feel like I'm the only one seeing this clearly, but I also feel like I've alienated my sister. AITA for telling her she's enabling him. It was 2 a.m., and I was staring at my ceiling, fueled by lukewarm coffee and pure, unadulterated rage. My landlord, Mr. Henderson, a man whose greed was only matched by his lack of foresight, had just dropped a bombshell. My sister Kay and I had been renting a small duplex from him for 3 years. We were good tenants, always paid on time, never caused trouble, even fixed a leaky faucet ourselves last winter. Then, this week, he calls us up. Girls, he says, his voice dripping with false sweetness, I've decided to increase your rent by 30%. Effective immediately. 30%. We were already stretching our budgets thin. I tried to reason with him. Mr. Henderson, that's a huge jump. We can't afford that. He just chuckled. Well, you can either pay it, or you can find somewhere else to live. Plenty of people would love to live in this neighborhood. That's when the 2 a.m. rage kicked in. I knew Mr. Henderson was a bit of a slumlord, always cutting corners. I remembered reading about a loophole in our lease agreement, something about him needing to provide proper notice for any major changes, and that he had to be living in the same city to be our landlord. Turns out, he'd moved to Florida 6 months ago and never told us. The next morning, I drafted a very polite, very firm letter. I cited the lease clauses, pointed out his failure to comply with residency requirements, and stated that due to these breaches, we were terminating our lease. I also mentioned that we'd be seeking legal counsel regarding the rent increase demand. We moved out a week later, leaving the place spotless. Mr. Henderson, in his infinite wisdom, decided to try and sue us for the unpaid rent increase. He showed up in court, looking flustered, without a lawyer. The judge looked at his case, then at my meticulously organized documentation. Mr. Henderson, the judge said, his voice stern, you failed to meet the residency requirements for a landlord in this state. Furthermore, your attempt to unilaterally increase rent without proper notice is illegal. The tenants are not only within their rights to break the lease, but you owe them for emotional distress. The judge ordered him to pay us $500 each. As we walked out, I saw Mr. Henderson's face. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Turns out, he'd also been trying to sell the duplex, but because he wasn't legally residing in the state, the sale fell through. He was stuck with a property he couldn't legally rent out properly and couldn't sell. We got our money, and he got a taste of his own medicine. Sometimes, the best revenge is just knowing the law and having a good night's sleep. It was 2 a.m., and I was staring at my laptop screen, the blue light doing nothing to soothe my anxiety. My cat, Mittens, a fluffy calico I'd adopted from a shelter 5 years ago, was purring on my lap, a small comfort in the chaos of my life. I'd been laid off from my job 2 weeks prior, and the weight of uncertainty was crushing. My sister, Kay, had called earlier, her voice laced with worry, asking if I was okay. I'd assured her I was, but the truth was, I felt adrift. Suddenly, Mitten's purr stopped. She tensed, her ears swiveling towards the window. A faint scratching sound, then a soft meow, echoed from outside. Curious, I got up and peeked through the blinds. Huddled on my doorstep was a tiny, scrawny kitten, its fur matted and its eyes wide with fear. It was shivering, clearly abandoned. My heart ached. "Oh, you poor thing," I whispered, opening the door a crack. The kitten flinched but didn't run. It looked so vulnerable, so much like I felt. Without a second thought, I scooped it up. It was bone-thin, its ribs stark beneath its patchy fur. I brought it inside, warmed it with a towel, and offered it some milk. It lapped it up greedily, then curled into a tiny ball on the rug, finally safe. The next morning, I called the local animal shelter. "I found a kitten," I explained, my voice still thick with sleep. "It's very young, and I'm not sure if it's going to make it." The woman on the other end was kind but firm. "We're full," she said, "but bring it in, and we'll see what we can do." As I prepared to leave, the kitten, whom I'd started calling Lucky, stirred. It stretched, wobbled over to me, and rubbed against my leg, letting out a tiny, hopeful meow. In that moment, something shifted within me. I looked at Lucky, then at Mittens, who was watching the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. I thought about my own situation, the fear and uncertainty. And then I thought about this little creature, who had faced abandonment and found a flicker of hope. I put Lucky back in his makeshift bed. "You know what?" I said to myself, a smile finally breaking through the worry. "We're going to figure this out. Together." I decided not to take Lucky to the shelter. Instead, I called Kay. "Hey," I said, my voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "I'm going to keep him. And I think I'm going to start fostering. It feels right." Kay was silent for a moment, then she said, "I'm so proud of you. And I'll help you get supplies." That night, with Lucky purring softly beside Mittens, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The job situation was still uncertain, but I had found a new purpose, a small beacon of light in the darkness. Sometimes, it takes a tiny, shivering kitten to remind you of the kindness you're capable of, and the strength you have within you. I'm 27, married to my husband, M, for 9 years. We have 6 kids. I met him when I was young, and it feels like I blinked and suddenly I was married, overwhelmed, and questioning how I got here. This isn't the first time he's betrayed my trust. He's cheated before. I stayed. I believed the apologies and the promises that it would never happen again. I own that choice. What makes this harder is that outside of our marriage issues, he has generally been a good dad. He shows up for our kids. He makes time for them. Could he help more with cleaning and daily load? Yes. But he's not absent, and he's not uninvolved. That's part of what makes this so confusing. I also genuinely loved him. For a long time, I really believed he cared about me and respected me, even when things weren't perfect. But this time feels different. This time broke something in me. I found explicit messages on M's phone between him and a man he barely knows. It wasn't just talking. He was exchanging X-rated videos of me, for videos of this other man's wife. I never consented to any of this. He talked about me in degrading ways, like I wasn't even a person. My body, my privacy, my trust were shared without my knowledge or permission. I feel sick typing this. I feel violated, embarrassed, and ashamed even though I know logically this wasn't my fault. The person who was supposed to protect me is the one who exposed me. I don't even know how to tell anyone in my life what happened. I keep replaying every red flag I ignored and every excuse I made because I thought, keeping the family together, mattered more than my own dignity. Now I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to process this or how to even begin rebuilding myself after something like this, especially when the person who hurt me is also the father of my children and someone I once trusted. I finally told him what I found. He broke down, crying, saying he was ashamed and that he'd never do it again. He asked if we could go to therapy, individually and together. I agreed, not because I think it will fix things, but because I need to understand how this happened and what my options are. For now, I'm staying. I'm focusing on my kids and myself. I'm looking into resources for victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. I need to heal, and I need to figure out if there's any path forward for us, or if this is the end. Sources. 1. My husband committed the ultimate betrayal, reddit.com, https://www.reddit.com/trueoffmychest/comment/1pws8s8/my_husband_committed_the_ultimate_betrayal, published December 27, 2025.